Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video with Mr. Terry as I continue my search for historical knowledge here on the internet. Alright, today's video kind of caught my eye from its title, which is The Surprising Foreign SS Volunteers That Fought for Hitler. That kind of caught my eye because I was, immediately just kind of thinking to myself, what kind of groups, would do that? What would be the motivation for that? And I'm excited to learn more about that. All right. So this channel is called The Front. I think this is the first video I've checked out from them. So I don't really know necessarily what their style is or anything like that. But just the content of the video is what kind of caught my eye. So I thought we would go ahead and check this out. If you like the original video, make sure to go down to the description below, and the link to the original video will be there, and you can give them a like and subscribe, which I would appreciate, very much. If you like what I'm doing here, love to have you follow along and be a subscriber and enable notifications if you'd like to be part of our live streams and live premieres, so you know when those are. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Surprising SS volunteers that fought for Hitler. All right, let's see who these people are.
Like most things in life, World War II can't simply be painted over in black and white. Not all Germans were Nazis, and not all Nazis were German. In the midst of all the chaos...
Interesting, because you definitely think, okay, that, yeah, not all Germans are Nazis, he said, but not all Nazis were German. I don't know if people would really think like that. That's definitely not what comes to mind, right? You think, why would you be a Nazi, or why would you be a Nazi and not German? So hopefully that's what they talk about, because you usually think of it as a German nationalistic thing, right?
Chaos and destruction of World War II, there are naturally many oddities that we don't often hear about and are mostly overshadowed by the macro scale of things during that time and the black and white picture many people like to paint for themselves. In this week...
Dude looks pissed. Look at this guy. Right here. He's not even steering it. Come on. We all know. We've all towed a car, right? Hopefully he's okay. But, yeah, this guy's not steering. Oh, I see. There's wounded. Maybe dead back there. Yikes, but he's not steering there. Yeah. No wonder they're not celebrating. Jeez.
Week's front episode, however, we'll be wiping that canvas clean and adding in a couple of grey strokes. And specifically, we'll be taking a look at Hitler's foreign SS units, where they came from, why they fought, and their ultimate fate.
Great. Excited to hear. Facts of history. Okay, so that's what their channel is about.
A propaganda staple for the Nazi Party, the elite 5th Panzer SS Division Viking was, as the name suggests, made up primarily of Nordic peoples from Scandinavia. Although these men weren't ethnically German, the volunteers were eagerly absorbed by Nazi Germany and touted as a pride of the SS, with propaganda minister Goebbels hoping to show his citizens that even unaffiliated Nordic supermen were willing to volunteer for the noble cause of Nazism.
So that is interesting, for the fact that the Germans, it's not like these people are like sneaking in to be Nazis, right? That the German opened up their sort of definitions of superior people to also non-Germans, right? So you have, yeah, the superior Nordic men, like he was saying, the Vikings, right? I mean, if the Germans really are people that have used history, right, to study superiority in Europe and stuff like that, the Vikings better be up there, right, with how influential and dominant were for centuries in all parts of Europe. I mean, Vikings were heading down to siege Constantinople, right, making their way down rivers down south there in all parts of Europe. We know all that, and most monarchies, like in Europe, have Viking ancestry to them at some point. Right? So that makes sense from their perspective if they have actually used history to help define a little bit more of those superior peoples and making it apply not just to ethnic Germans. Because domination, definitely a historical domination, if you're just talking about Europe, it's ignorant to think it's a German trait.
Well, these die-hard anti-communist Nords did more than just meekly volunteer for the cause, but being an SS division, the brigade naturally committed many atrocities.
Okay, before they move on, so a encouraging point was the clear anti-communist stance of the Nazis, right? Which was a big platform for them, was doing that. So that might have been a reason, not just for the Viking, these or Viking, not really Vikings, or descendants of them, but to join them for a more socioeconomic, political reason, right? With fighting against communism again, which was a big stance of the Nazi parties. So not just the ethnic ties, right, for Nazis, more to being a Nazi than I guess just the racial superiority argument, which definitely is the thing that overshadows everything else.
Including the mass slaughtering of Ukrainian civilians, partisans, and Jews when the Viking volunteers were sent to the Eastern Front in 1941.
So they committed some of the
To
atrocities
add to the
for Nazis.
infamy of this unit, notorious SS Dr. Josef Mengele served directly with the division in its early campaigns, performing his role as a combat medic and receiving an Iron Cross for saving 2 wounded men from a burning tank. As history writes, however, this medic himself was wounded and was absorbed into the concentration camp system, where he continued his work
Why?
as a sadistic doctor performing vile experiments on the inmate population at Auschwitz.
So he is involved in the eugenics program, somebody, from the Nordic states. I don't know if they're going to talk about it, but a question I'm having too is those people that came from the Nordic states and fought with the Nazis, what did their people think of them? Like if they're like Norwegian, right? A place that the Nazis went and invaded. Were they seen as traitors? Right? You'd think it'd be incompatible if it was a nation that was fighting the Germans, like Norway.
Capitalizing on the absolute political, religious, and ethnic destabilization of the Balkan region of Europe during the 20th century, the Nazis figured it would be a great idea to play into this during World War II and formed a SS unit made up almost entirely from Bosnian Muslims.
Now this seems like it'd be something that'd be compatible too because of the dominance of Christianity, right, within Germany and the Nazi party, that it could be multi-religious. But again, a question would be: are the Nazis opening up these definitions to simply help their military, or are they truly enveloping these types of people into their ideology? One would think it'd be the latter there.
Called the 13th Waffen SS Mountain Division. Formed in 1943, this SS unit took an oath to both Hitler and the Croatian fascist leader Ante Pavelic, who by himself warrants an entire other video for the atrocities he perpetrated behind the scenes. With that being said, this Muslim SS division were themselves bad enough, fighting in 8 different campaigns around the Balkans and becoming infamous for their heavy-handed treatment of local Serbian and Jewish civilian populations.
So it almost feels like with these people that they're fighting for them more than the Nazis, like for themselves, I should say, more than the Nazis. That these other, the diversity of the Balkans regions is just incredible. Just look at World War I, to not go very far back before World War II to figure that out. So it's almost like, not that they are embracing the Nazi ideology, but they maybe felt that there was common goals that way. So they, it said they were taking an oath to Hitler, but they like taking up the arms and taking up the banner of the Nazi party. That may not be the case there.
The unit committed an untold number of war crimes that go mostly unknown due to Germany's prolificness in World War II, but were still not wholly immune from the swift hand of justice in the end. Most of the unit shed their uniforms and deserted in 1945 when they were sent to the Eastern Front. However, 38 officers were eventually captured after the war, and ultimately 10 were executed for their part in committing the war crimes during their tenure in the Balkans.
Did you know memory foam was developed in 1966? That's 10 years older than VHS.
I did not know that.
Spain was probably the most politically fit.
Okay, so moving on. Looks like we're moving on to the next one, getting the Spanish involved here. So there was nothing really in there that said that it's necessarily like Islam like finding a way to incorporate Islamic values into it. It was more about these people being having a common enemy or goal with the Nazi Party than embracing Nazi ideologies. But you did see now with the Viking, I keep saying Viking now, the Nordic people that help fight, and now these Bosnian Muslims, that it's more just like using them as a kind of a, like, you know, you both have common enemies more than anything else than expanding the Nazi ideology or people selling out themselves to join the Nazis.
Fearful country in World War II. Headed by the dictator Francisco Franco, he decided it was best to lurk in the shadows and in the grey areas of the war and not openly declare Spain as fascist, as he did not want to aggravate his neighbours and open up Spain to an extremely bloody war
Act
with
like
England
it, but don't declare that you are that.
Despite this, Franco was still willing to help out his fascist friend in Germany and allowed the Wehrmacht to set up recruitment depots in the large cities, also encouraging Spaniards to join the Germans. Over 40,000 Spanish and a number of Portuguese ended up initially joining the Wehrmacht 250th Infantry, or Blue Division, where they were sent to the east.
This makes sense. This is probably something people actually already know, that although the relationship with Germany and Spain maybe isn't as a direct in the war as like Germany with Italy as like an official alliance member, but if you don't have to really know a ton about history to know that they had a relationship, though. With Franco and Hitler had actually helped Franco in the Spanish Civil War, right, where they are also fighting like communists, for example. A lot of people say that Spanish War in Spain was in a way kind of a dress rehearsal for World War II. I've kind of heard that analogy before. It's kind of a dress rehearsal. They were able to practice maybe on a little bit smaller scale, like especially for Hitler, kind of practicing a lot of the military tactics and using technologies that, of course, they had been using during the interwar years and had been developing a lot of it in secret, of course, and getting a little bit of practice in a way before World War II, as we know it, is going to break out. But if you didn't know about that, that was not some kind of secret relationship between the two. That was very well known.
They then proceeded to win Hitler's absolute adoration on the Russian front by holding their line despite massive casualties. Hitler referred to them as equal to the best German divisions he had, and greatly respected their courage in battle. In 1943, however, Franco eventually caved into political pressure and recalled what was left of the Spanish fighting force. Thousands ultimately refused to return and were drafted as the 101st SS Spanish Volunteer Company into the 28th Volunteer Grenadier Division Wallonen, and later into the 11th SS Division, where these fascist Spaniards would fight all the way to the surrender of Germany, with many being captured by the Russians and some not returning home until 1954. Russian history is a beast of its own, and there's no doubt that there were many marginalized Russian groups such as the White Army and those affected by Stalin's Great Terror in 1936 to 1938.
Now I'm thinking about this, there's plenty of, you'd think, Russians that would have incentive to fight against Stalin. The ones that had been displaced from earlier civil wars, right? Yeah, like the Whites, the Whites versus the Reds. The Whites being defeated there, that they would have absolutely an incentive to want to fight against them. So this one wouldn't be as surprising, but I'm interested to know what their impact is actually going to be. There's a lot of people that don't like Stalin and don't like the Soviet system there.
One of the results of such a divided society was the formation of SS Sturmbrigade RONA, headed by Russian anti-communist Bronislav Kaminsky. Although the organizational structure of this unit was an absolute...
You'd almost think that these people, these anti-communist Russians, would still even be around, as the Civil War has now been, depending on when some of this is going to start, over 15 years ago, they would have been purged by now, right? That they exist, that's even surprising to me.
Absolute mess, and the Nazis didn't really know what to do with them. They eventually found a place for them in German security operations around the Baltic states.
Enemy is your friend, right?
Where, like many SS units, they committed numerous atrocities against the civilian populace. The unit never became an official division, because on the day Himmler was going to sign them in, the Warsaw Uprising began and they were never committed. They were, however, still sent to Warsaw, where they continued to commit war crimes in the name of Nazi Germany, but German High Command eventually got sick of them and executed their leader Bronislaw Kamiński, whilst drafting the remnants of the unofficial SS division into the Russian Liberation Army, which was a corps-sized army made up entirely of Russians sent in to fight with the Axis on the Eastern Front. Many of its leaders were tortured and hung when caught by the
Wow.
Hey, as I'm sure you've heard, the leader and founder of ISIS is now dead. What really surprised me was that after it happened,
Moving on.
army. Equipped with a burning desire to expunge the British from their homeland, the Tiger Legion, or simply Indian Legion, adopted the classic stance of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Made up of prisoners of war, as well as 3,000 Indian expats living in the Third Reich at the time, Infantry Regiment 950, later known as the Indian Volunteer Legion of the Waffen SS, was proposed to spearhead an Axis invasion of Western India through Afghanistan by way of the Persian Gulf.
Now, this time, if you didn't know, India was a colony of the British. And the British had been known for, bolstering their armies with the use of Indians in huge numbers, right? And in both World Wars. So there being a group there makes sense, and also would be difficult for the fact that there'd be incentive if they were anti-British, right? And want to stick it to the British, maybe even use it as a pathway to freedom. Maybe not unlike how the British would try to recruit African Americans during the American Revolution to fight, and promising that, hey, if you help us, the British, against the Americans here, we'll free you, right? So you could see possibly an incentive for that. That's just a prediction. I'm wondering if that is what it's going to be, the reason why they're able to get Indians involved. So I'm going to go back 5 seconds because I just want to see. Make sure I don't miss anything.
Axis invasion of Western India through Afghanistan by way of the Persian Gulf. After the Axis's heavy defeats at the Caucasus by the Soviet Union, however, this initial plan was largely abandoned, and the infantry regiment was transferred to the SS, where it fought in the desperate defense of Germany and her surrounding territories in the Great Retreat from the advancing Allied forces. The unit was ultimately disbanded, and surviving members were sent back to India, where many faced trial for treason by British authorities.
That would make sense.
Although not many in number.
Yeah, if you're gonna fight against the British and you're an Indian, you sure better be on the winning side, because you are not going to be looked at kindly. You are going to be a traitor, so you better choose wisely.
Volunteers from the Commonwealth did indeed exist in World War II,
For sure.
primarily under the remote direction of pro-Nazi British fascist John Amory. Known as the British Free Corps, or BFC, the original idea was to persuade Allied prisoners of war to the Nazi cause and use them as propaganda to showcase how even the Western Allies saw the Soviets as a threat. Nazi High Command did indeed go through with this plan, even though the unit never reached more than 27 men in strength, despite numerous
27 men? That's it? Wait.
Even though the unit never reached more than 27 men in strength, despite numerous recruitment drives under Amory, all of which were complete failures.
Yeah.
And the limited number of men who joined, including a couple of Canadians and a couple of New Zealanders, were drafted into a Nordic SS volunteer division and saw action against the Soviets. After the war,
it was almost like they're more interested in fighting the communist Soviets with Germany than fighting for Germany. Does that make sense? They're fighting against Russia, not for Germany, which would make a lot more sense. Seen a lot of that. You've seen a lot of this now, where a bunch of these groups that they're talking about, their goal is more anti-Soviet, anti-communist than anything else. That's why they're fighting alongside the Germans.
One Canadian and one New Zealand soldier claimed they'd only joined the Corps to wreck it and to gather intelligence for its ultimate demise, with the exception of the director of the British Free Corps project, John Amory, who we just mentioned, who was hanged in December of 1945 by the British for high treason. So guys, I really do hope you found this video interesting, because I sure found it interesting to research. I did miss out on a couple of Wehrmacht battalions, such as the Arabs who fought for the Wehrmacht and a couple of others, but in general, I'm pretty sure I've covered most bases. So do let me know if I missed any in the comments section below. And just before you go typing the Irish and American renegades who fought for the SS, I will be doing a video on them separately sometime in the future. So if there's any actual units that I missed, please make sure you let me know in the comments section below. And just before you go, guys, I want to give a big thank you for just 30,000 subscribers on this channel.
Awesome.
It's pretty massive. I'm pretty blown away. And yeah, all I can really say is thanks. I hope you guys continue to enjoy the content. And if you want to support the channel more than you already are by watching this video, then I do have a Patreon linked in the description below.
Definitely.
And if you do want to interact with other history buffs, I do also have a Discord where you can chat with them. It's a really fun Discord and they supply me with most of my history memes. So make sure you go check them out, guys. Anyways, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope you learned something new.
Cool. Awesome, great. That was my first time watching from them, the front, and that's great. Love what they do. I always love those topics that a little bit different, right? And some peculiarities and exceptions that we see. That's always awesome to look at into history. So again, this kind of title just kind of caught my eye about what kind of groups. If you're a foreign group, you weren't a German, would actually fight for them. And that I got a lot of clarity there. A lot of it, again, being unifying with them simply because of the anti-communist stance, which makes the most sense that I could think of. Because it'd be hard with the racial identity of the Nazis to embrace that if you don't fit that mold. But yeah, what they were talking about, all those, none of those, he did a good job at bringing up evidence and make it understandable there. And although it was definitely varied there with these groups if they were actually influential and out on the war. Some were, maybe some weren't. But we also saw the commonality of a lot of these groups committing war atrocities, which again is not unique to the Axis powers, but seeing those groups also participate in that was interesting to me too. So anyway, I hope you really like this. I really do. I definitely will be interested in their channel going forward, so I think you should definitely, again, go down to my description down here, click the links so you can give them a like and subscribe and see their new videos that are coming out. This is a fairly new video, I believe, so looks like they're doing some good stuff right now, and a good one of the great, looks like good new growing channels out there. So all right, with that, just to plug some things on the way out, if you had not subscribed, love to have you around. If you want to be a part of our historical community, that'd be great too. We just hit over 4,000 people as members of our Discord server. It's been very active, very lively today with a lot of history-minded people and having some great discussions going over there. If you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, one of the benefits you get from that is being able to vote in polls for videos that make it on their channel. It's just a way to have a little more say in what happens here, and pledges start as low as $1 a month, and that just helps with little things with the channel, so I really do appreciate that. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and end it here, and we'll see you soon. Bye.